think big, go big or go home. Which brings me to my next speaker, people. Okay, Uncle Haroun Pochee. He's a chartered accountant. He's an entrepreneur. He's an ex-auditor. He's a community servant. He's a youth coach and mentor. He has extensive business experience. He's a business coach and entrepreneur. You know the difference between a self-employed person and an entrepreneur? So I don't want to preempt what Uncle Haroun is going to say, but I always thought I was an entrepreneur. And I liked telling everybody, I'm an entrepreneur. I couldn't even spell the word. But the fact that I sounded so important, I'm an entrepreneur, until my accountant told me, Baji, you're not an entrepreneur. You are a self-employed somebody. The day you die, the business dies with you. Because you are too invested and you in the working the business. While you spending 5 hours doing training, who's doing business development? That means who is marketing the business. All right, so I don't want to preempt what Uncle Haroun is going to talk to us about. He's the editor of Rosh Gold News. He's a founder member of community-based Rosh Gold Investment Holdings more than 40 years ago. Rosh Gold now has a 600 million rand, which they actually administer. So your pictures, you must know where to go with it. Don't come to me. Don't waste your time. Just go straight to Uncle Haroun. Do not pass, begin. Do not collect 200. Go there. Coordinator of Rosh Gold Young Business Achiever Awards and Youth Business Programs. He's investment committee chair at Rosh Gold for all classes of investments. He's a founder member of An-Nahl and Islamic Finance Initiative. He's a Sukuk trustee, Al-Barakah Sukuk Trust. Hobbies include reading. Did you hear that? Reading, reading, reading. And I'm serious about it. How many of you read a book in the last month? A complete book. I'm not talking about your set works, the stuff you have to read at school. A complete book. Look at them lying. Okay, mashallah. No, good. Well done. Sisters, are you also reading, right? There are more boys reading than ladies, because there's only fewer ladies. Statistically, right? Okay. Shura member of Vereniging and District Muslim Association, coordinator and contributor to the Roshni 55 pictorial essay. He's a member of leadership team at school and community organizations. Uncle Haroun Pochee, Jazakallah so much. Please, the floor is all yours. Well done.
Today we learned two very interesting concepts before I came on. One was kun, and the other was buka. Now, why is kun interesting? Sheikh illustrated the reason why we use kun. Only Allah can make it happen. So we must never ever forget what we can do without Allah's assistance and Allah's guidance. So when we look at the Battle of Badr, when we look at how the caravans went from Medina through to Syria and conducted trade. And it is out of that, even on the Silk Route during the Ottoman Empire, from Turkey right into China, and that was the basis on which the dawah was done and Islam could flourish. Now, how does that impact on you? Young people, you're thinking, you're wondering, you are starting your life with a foundation. You are at a stage where I was maybe 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and you are at a stage where my opportunity came up. So when I was talking to some of our esteemed presenters this morning, they all have been through the same sort of process. Nobody was given like a golden start just to start off, because even if you're given that, and Sheikh told us about the inheritance, do you know how to look after it and how to manage it? So when I come to my topic is spending, saving, investing. Let's look at it holistically. Why spending? Who wants to tell me? The girls haven't shared with us. Why is spending so important in my topic? Gee, how much money we use? Yes, correct. So can we use more than what we earn? What happens if we use more than what we earn?
You're going to start with the credit or the banks and then everything goes in.
And what happens?
If you can't pay it back, then they take your business, your house, your car.
And the impact of that?
You're a homeless guy.
Besides being a homeless guy, your family and everybody else
Also homeless.
also homeless, right? So do we get the concept that we're talking about? That's just on the spending side. Now, when we look at spending, simplicity becomes the driving force of what our life should be. Gee,
Talking to the wrong side.
why? But you allow them to spend because you give it to them.
You
Gee,
don't allow you to spend sleeping on a couch.
mattress, because myself and Mohammed spoke earlier about sleeping on a mattress. How many of you have slept on a mattress? All do. Still?
No.
Right? Now, typically in that context, when we look at the spending side of it, if we make more than what we spend, we have got currency. And currency means we can invest. Right? Do we understand that, girls? So, when we go back to savings and spending, it is the wasteful spending. Now, if you follow government, if you follow politics, if you look at the country and how much of wasteful expenditure has gone on, who is poorer? The country and us. So now when we look at the potholes on the road, we look at the load shedding, which all of you have been affected by. You look at the lack of transport services, government, even medical. Those of you whose parents don't have medical aid and go to state hospitals and you hear the stories in state hospitals, that is what happens. So wasteful expenditure becomes very important to us. For youngsters like you, and even the ladies next door, what is important is we need to understand our injunction of not wasting what we do not have or even what we have, because there's always going to be a need for it in later life. So whether it's going to be a sickness, whether it's like you say you lost your house because of the banks or whatever it is, you're going to need to fall back on savings. But to me, what savings becomes for you becomes the funder of the speech that Uncle Ashraf was talking about. So without savings, you can't do anything. I give you an example of my grandchildren. Typical grandchildren, we bored. What do? So my wife and I said, go outside, there's a table, sell lemonade. Guys, you guys won't believe. Not only the people of the community, but the workers in the community. 2 days, 1,500 rand later. A friend of mine, whose son is at varsity, studying technology, he told the guy, you know how to cook, make chicken, let's market it on social media. He ended up making 4,000 or 5,000 during his school holiday, varsity holiday. So now we're beginning to conceptualize what it is that we need to spend on. And if our life is simple, then we're going to spend on simplicity. So typical again, BMW 5 Series versus Toyota Corolla. Both do the same thing, both took me to Durban. When I studied at varsity and I started working in Durban, I had a Volkswagen Beetle, which cost me 1,200 rand in those days, right? And with 20 rand or 40 rand, I could get to Durban. Today you can't do that. Right? But imagine if I was spoiled and given a Mercedes-Benz, and if I had to maintain the Mercedes-Benz. So coming back to your question earlier, or your point you made, do you want a high-maintenance wife, or do you want somebody that is simple? So the choice is yours. You know, we always say, you choose your in-laws, you choose your wife. Right? So you don't get married by accident. So that is the basis of what we invest in. So earlier you heard what our MC said. When we talk of learning, we now taking on the concept of investing in our life, going right to the day we go to Kabar. Right? So if we don't have the capacity to learn, implement, become lifelong learners, today in professional life they call it continuing professional development. Our Nabi has taught us this 1500 years ago. When you guys go to Medina, is it a holiday or is it a process of learning that when you come back, you reflect on yourself and you say, hey, you know what? Sitting in the masjid, making ibadat, my eyes have opened to another possibility. So that is the investment that we make first for ourselves. Then we invest in our deen, and if we can apply those principles, whatever we do, the barakah is going to flow, which one of the other speakers is going to talk about. Now, investing from a financial perspective, we've got to understand what our challenges are. We live, please tell me if I'm going over it. We live in a time, we live in an environment, we live in a world where there's two systems that dominate. We that are born Muslims, we have a value system that we inculcated with. But because we live in a world that is not a Muslim world, we are, I don't know if we say indoctrinated, but we are made to believe that that value system is greater than ours. So when you look at history, and this is why you read, if you look at history, when you look at the civilizations that collapsed, why did they collapse? We talked of spending. Most civilizations collapsed, including the Ottoman Empire, because they went to war and they lost money. They couldn't fund the wars. What made Islam spread? The wars that we went to, we won with Allah's assistance, and it gave us the rich and the wealth to be able to invest in our value system. So you as young people should not forget what your value system is going to be. And today a good example, I'm going to ask you guys, what's a good example of this clash of civilization today? Exactly what is happening. The war in Gaza. If you look at what's happening with the war in Gaza, who's funding the Yahud? The Americans. America is bankrupt, yet they're funding the Yahud because they want to maintain the value system. If that collapses, that value system is gone. So we must understand, when we sit every night on our YouTube shorts or the TikTok shorts, again, I come back to what I told you earlier, you have the option. The option is search for what is beneficial. Rab is it ni ilma. Right? Allah, give me beneficial knowledge. Knowledge that I can apply. And to me, that is the best investment, because if you learn about investing, if you learn about business, you can only get benefit out of it, because the barakah will flow and Allah will guide you. Now, I talk about this from a personal experience in my life. I never had a rich father. I had to go study, started my own business. Out of the business, other businesses started. But because of my commitment to my continued learning and development, the opportunities then come up. So when you look at yourself, and I think Sheikh has told you people there's a number of times, but how did the Deen Team start? What made it start? He was working once upon a time. Remember Sheikh of the good old days? We've spoken about that a number of times. But to me is, when you look at that, you ask yourself, where is your opportunity going to come from? So even when you look for your wife, brother, how do you groom your wife? How do you invest in the relationship? How do you develop a relationship of communal well-being, which then filters down to the family and the kids and the generations later? So understand how that value system impacts on us from a pure perspective of investments, on spending, and obviously the savings which I've said. So I was telling you about my personal experience over the 40 years. Rosh Goal was something like this, what we're doing today, a joke. 5 friends got together in the evenings, we used to sit and talk. Hey, in those days, education department used to make slate boards to give to the students in the schools because they didn't have books during apartheid times. So we used to sit, then we said, hey, let's stop talking, let's just put 80 Rand a month away. Now 80 times 12 gives you 1,000 Rand for the year. We've got 5,000 to invest. So over 3 years, we've got 16,000. We started buying, selling a bit of school uniforms, going to auctions, whatever it is. Whoever had the expertise would then go and sell it. But as the success built up and we spoke to other people, they said, we want to join. Before long, we were 100 people, contributing 85 Rand a month. Today, 3,500 people later, 600 million Rand later, in terms of assets. But what has it done? Education. It's given us opportunities to study investments. It's given us opportunity to go into business. It's given us opportunities to learn marketing. It's given us opportunity to create jobs. And what stops any of you here today to do exactly the same? And you will be sitting here in 30 or 40 years' time telling the next generation of champs that that is what we're doing. So if we understand our role, as future leaders, now that is another thing we learn out of the Rosh Goal. Leaders are not born, leaders are made. Right? So every opportunity at leadership will give you an opportunity to create and exploit that opportunity that is going to come to you. Now, I can go on here the whole day. We've got other speakers. I'm going to throw the floor open for a while, just in terms of what questions come to your mind after this little discussion.
Let's take 3 questions, please, for Uncle Haroun.
Chi, stand up, Joe. They can hear you and a bit louder than me.
Uncle, can you just tell me some marketing tips? If you start a business, just to advertise your business so everyone knows about it.
Easiest today is social media, but the important thing is the product you deliver. So if you take and you tell somebody, do you know Soli's Corner? And everybody will know Soli's Corner. Next to Soli's Corner is Echo Wires. Now, what marketing do they do?
Food. Big word.
It's the quality of the product, the service they deliver, and the value that they give you. So when you're looking and you don't have money, you say, instead of going to Callisto's or somewhere where I've got to spend 300 Rand on a meal, I'll go spend $100 at Soli's Corner. So the marketing is not only reaching out to an audience, the marketing is what your product delivers and what I said earlier, the value you create for your customers. Because what will happen, we heard earlier about the COVID time and how the housewives took over. How did their messages go out? Because it was the values that they gave the people. Any other questions? Gee.
What is the best way to educate yourself on something before you invest?
What was the first revelation to our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Iqra. And what does Iqra say? Read in the name of thy
Lord.
Right. That's the first thing. The second thing which I've learned and I practiced it religiously, Rabbi Zidni Ilma, every day after Fajr Namaz or after Tahajjud Namaz. Because if you ask Allah, give me beneficial knowledge that I can use for you and your deen, and we do it for the pleasure of Allah. I'm here today for the pleasure of Allah. You guys are here for the pleasure of Allah. So to me, that is the most important thing. And reading depends. You know, something I've learned. You don't read book from first page to last page. You take what is of interest to you and what you can apply. So if it interests you, you read it, it's there, it's in your subconscious. The day you find that you need to solve a problem, that comes out automatically. Allah just sends it out to you and you remember and you put it together. So understand that when you're reading, it's not like we heard earlier, like an exam that you're going to be reading and you can apply. You're reading so that when you put into that situation, you've already been through somebody else's eyes. You know, earlier we spoke of Bill Gates. There's a book called The Outliers. Did anybody hear about that book? So The Outliers tells you you've got to spend 10,000 hours to become an expert. He's a West Indian guy who wrote this book, Malcolm Gladwell. So obviously the example he gave, I didn't like that one, but because we grew up in that time, he spoke about the Beatles, he spoke about Bill Gates. So at varsity, Bill Gates used to spend his time. And that was the research and the experimentation that gave him his results. Last question, I saw a hand up earlier. Gee.
Uncle, what's Uncle's view on using AI to develop the business or developing any?
A bit louder.
What's Uncle's view on developing the business using AI?
You know, AI is like everything else, is a facilitation. So it's going to give you guidance. Who's going to use Akka, if you understand Akka, right? Who's got to use the skills? Who's got to use the knowledge? So even to use AI, for example, I've got to know how to go on to ChatGPT to do the exact search I need to be doing. Now, if I don't know how to do that, And you know, I think you make a very good point, but not only in relation to AI. Every old person in your circle, if they don't know how to use a cell phone, like what our brother said earlier, the 75%, that to me, or the 95%, that to me should just be our challenge in learning. Because today, I use my cell phone for emails, I use my cell phone for my banking, I use my cell phone for everything, anything I can do, I just do it because sometimes you're sitting somewhere and you can do it. So the first thing earlier, what the young gentleman asked about the marketing, the first thing every morning, your salam message to somebody, your motivational message to somebody. So if you send 10 messages to those circles around you, and if it's an ayat of the Quran, how better to learn the Quran that in 15 minutes you've sent out maybe 30 messages, 40 messages. We do it for Jummah. We do it for well-wishing. So that's just the start of what we're doing. Questions? Last one before I close.
Can I pose the last one?
Gee.
So, for an employed person, when their salary comes in the beginning of the month, is there a ratio of how he should plan himself? So much percent should go towards his expenses, so much percent should be saved, so much percent he can maybe spoil himself, and so much percent needs to be reinvested. And then the same thing when a person is self-employed or entrepreneur, I use those words carefully, but if a person is self-employed, when he works out his profits at the end of the month, is there a ratio? And I'll ask Uncle Haroun and also ask Uncle Mohammed if you want to contribute to that also, I'll appreciate you as well.
Gee. If Uncle Muhammad wants to start, he can start.
That's all.
Sure. You know what is interesting here? Look at the question Shakir Bhai puts at us. A working class person. Should we be working class people? So if we don't educate ourselves, if we don't gain beneficial knowledge, what does it do? We become working class people, even as professionals. How many of your parents are professionals? Right. Now, even as professionals who are tertiary educated, who are experts in what they do, unless they're in a very small percentage at the top, all have the same problem in that the expenses are greater than earnings. We did an exercise with a professional couple, a lawyer and an accountant. 2 houses in the car, children got to have nursery school, the other one's got to go to preschool, one parent got to go drop off, the other one's got to come back. Living to pay a house in a decent area because both are professional. Wallahi, between the two of them, okay, it was some time ago, between the two of them in those days was 130,000 and they couldn't. Net, not gross, net. So the idea should be, you know, and because you grow up in that environment, you don't want to go through what your parents have been, where there's no money in the house. So Muhammad and I were talking earlier, unlike your generation, we had to go to work from the age of 6 or 7. He said he went into his father's pharmacy, I went into my grandfather's shop, I packed, I marked goods, I cleaned shelves, I then went into sales, then went into taking cash, and obviously then decided business was for me. So just coming back to your question, Shah. Percentages of, depends on circumstances. If you take the traditional sort of Western thinking, they say 20% of your money should be for retirement. they encourage the young people to start borrowing at a young age and borrow as much as possible to invest. So when I was at an accounting firm, the guys around me all had overdrafts in those days, I'm talking 1978, 1979, of 100 to 200,000 rand. And they put it into equities and they left it. The dividends that came back, the same way they structured the BE deals. So they borrow and the dividends will repay your loans. In 10 years, 15 years time, with inflation, if the values grow up, you sell some equity and you pay back your debt. Now, unfortunately for us, we don't, although there's Islamic banking today, we don't, or we've been taught not to borrow or to gain. Now, when we look at wealth from a Western concept, and now you started something else completely, but it ties in with investing still. How much do you leverage? And it comes back to the discussion does everybody understand this concept of leverage?
No.
Okay, so what capitalistic system tells you, you extract maximum out of the little capital you have. So typical, us as Muslims, we make an investment of 1 million rand and we earn 10% is 1.1. They take 20% as the deposit on the million and they're making 100,000. So where we haven't borrowed or leveraged, that's actually the term, the return is 10%. But 100 on 200, because that is his actual investment of capital, is 50% return. So they make their money based on credit, or lending, or borrowing. We don't believe in that. We say collective, Roj Gold would not be worth 600 million if we didn't have the collective pool of everybody putting in that 85 rand or 500 or the ED monies of the children, and basically that's what allowed us to get to where we are. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah.